Good afternoon. Thanks for coming. So we're going to try to cover a fair amount of ground in 25 minutes. Appreciate everyone for allowing me to have this conversation in English. No one wants to hear bad French in a Texan accent. If you've ever seen Inglourious Bastards, Buongiorno, where the Brad Pitt guy was trying to impersonate an Italian, nobody wants to go through that. So I'm going to dive right in. This is me. I'm not here to talk about me, but a little bit my background. I was an attacker for several years. I was a penetration tester back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then I was a CISO for the next 18 years in financial services companies. So AIG, Texas Capital Bank, a couple of others. So attacking was more fun, defending was more profitable. And at WIB, we are doing both. We are attacking and defending APIs for fun and profit. And I want to jump into actually, I can't see my own screen now because of the display, so bear with me for a second. There are 5 goals that I want to have for today, right? I want to understand and communicate. Let me pivot this real quick because this will tell me what I need. Perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about the 4 biggest problems that companies run into dealing with API security today. Some are technical, some are not. So it's amazing how few of our problems are technical, but the technical part is definitely features. I'm going to give a working knowledge of how API security is different from traditional web application security, which is something that your penetration testers and very often your CISOs are unaware of. It's a big blind spot. We're going to have a list of questions so that you and your teams can be prepared from the questions that you are going to start getting from stakeholders, whether they be auditors, executives, board members, regulators, so forth. So we did a conference in Orlando a few weeks ago that we only had one day because of the hurricane. Happens in Florida. But I had 8 regulators, 8, at my booth at the same time, asking me questions about APIs. 5 from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which is a banking regulator. 2 from the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, and 1 from Insurance Farm Credit, all at the same time. So I wound up giving them this custom regulatory presentation here. So the message there is regulators are starting to understand that they need to look into this area, and you don't want to be caught on your back foot. So I always want my customers and people that come to my sessions to go back and be the smartest guys in the room, smartest girls in the room when it comes to API security. So we're going to try to cover that. We're going to walk through a real-world case study, and actually we have our API hacker in chief here. We're going to talk about hacking a bank, talking about fun and profit, and I'll ask a couple of questions, and they're like, what's the hack? And why would I ransom this bank if I can just steal money through the APIs, right? Ransomware is noisy. You have to announce yourself. There's no need to do that if you can steal it the way that we did. And then we're going to learn how a defense must be informed by the offense. And that's really the basis of web API security. So the API security industry started with folks like my colleague here that were attacking APIs for years as part of official operations that we don't really talk about, but they happen. And we're taking that knowledge and building it into both a platform and a service offering. And the concept there is, if your defense isn't informed by the offense, you're not looking in the right places. So goal number 1, 4 biggest problems. Technology is one of these, maybe 2. The first one is ownership. We talk to a lot of customers and a lot of clients that don't really know who owns API security. Is it the CISO? Is it the head of DevOps? Is it the CIO? This is a particularly messy area because the stakeholders go across multiple silos. And ultimately what we find is the CISOs are figuring out, well, if I'm going to get fired for a breach anyway, right? This is why CISO stands for career is suddenly over. I may as well have some knowledge about what's actually happening. The problem is the security teams typically don't understand APIs. They don't understand the design. They don't understand the engineering. They don't understand how it changes the attack surface. And that's a big challenge. Visibility is the second biggest problem. We easily find our customers undershoot how many APIs they have by at least a factor of 2. And sometimes it's more like a factor of 8. So how many APIs do you think you have? Probably 100. No, you've got 800. We see this a lot. And not only visibility of the actual population, but visibility of what's exposed and what's listening, what's available to the outside. So very frequently we'll see 4 or 5 versions listening to the outside and exposing business logic and back-end systems, but they're only actually using 1 or maybe 2. And so they're exposing much more attack surface than they actually need, but they're unaware of it. The third one is material, and that's tooling for logic-based attacks. And I'll talk in a few minutes about how WAFs and API gateways are great at what they were designed to do. And it's not that they are obsolete. They are not designed for API and business logic attacks. They just were never designed with that in mind. They're perfectly good at detecting and blocking things like SQL injection and cross-site scripting. That's what they were built for. But they don't understand business logic. And perimeter devices in general can't and never will understand your business logic. And then management of API velocity. So adoption has already rapidly outpaced security. So APIs made their way around the world before security got our boots on. And it's only accelerating. How do you catch up and keep up with weekly or daily changes to the code that drives these APIs? We're going to talk about ways to do that. So goal number 2, how it differs from traditional web security and why. So fundamentally, your attack surface changes when your architecture changes, right? So if you change the way that something is designed, if you change the way that something is built, you change the attack surface. I'll give you a pictorial view of that in just a second. But what that means is when your attack surface changes, your attackers change as well. Right? The attackers change and they go to attack whatever is available. It doesn't matter what you think is available, it's what they can actually find. And so attacking APIs is mostly about, basic web security 101, just in a different venue, making unexpected requests. How do you handle things that your development teams weren't expecting somebody to send, right? It's like that old joke, a QA engineer walks into a bar, orders a beer, orders 100 beers, orders 1,000 beers, orders a giraffe. The bartender answers all the questions. Somebody comes in, asks where the bathroom is, and the place catches fire. Right? They never expected that. So it's these unexpected requests, and that means that your defenses have to evolve. Your defenses have to evolve to understand that you're exposing business logic directly to the outside world, and that's not a bug. That's kind of the point. Like that's the idea. That's what APIs do. But your defenses typically don't understand how business logic attacks work. And so if you think of the monolithic architecture on the right, on the left-hand side there, think of your old security model, take it outside of the technology realm. It's kind of a castle and a moat, right? So you've got one way in, one way out, you've got a guard standing out front with a spear or a halberd, something like that. And the internal peasants and people that work inside the castle, they're all fine, right? They're okay. They're doing their little thing and they trust each other. The monolithic architecture was actually pretty easy to secure. Once you understood your ingress points and your egress points, you could put a WAF in front of it, and everything more or less was okay. We actually have a big preponderance in the security space of writing really bad code and then putting a WAF in front of it. So you kind of put this 98-pound weakling in a bulletproof limo, and the devs never fix the bugs. That doesn't work when you expose the business logic to the outside. So when you change to a microservice architecture on the right-hand side, it's more of an architecture like a strip mall with stores open, doors on every store, and cash registers in every store, and ways into the back of the mall available through every store. And if your security team is still standing out in the front, at the front gate with a spear, expecting there's only one way in, one way out, they're still monitoring that, but they're missing all of these other attack surfaces, all these other ways in. They have no idea who's going in and out of those other places, right? So the attack surface has changed. And the rules-based systems, like WAFs and API gateways, were never designed to understand these logic-based attacks. So in 2019, we've all been using, I think everybody in the room is probably familiar with the OWASP Top 10, right? That's been around for almost 20 years. 2003 is when we started using the OWASP Top 10. In 2019, for the first time, working with the OWASP Foundation, some of the folks that we work with, they published for the first time the API Top 10. And there is some commonality. So injection, you'll see down here, injection attacks still happen against APIs. Cross-site scripting, SQL injection, we still see that. But broken object level authorization, broken function level authorization, these logic-based attacks, they weren't part of the original OWASP Top 10. And the devices that we're using to defend against them don't understand them. So the governing bodies are catching up, and you guys, just in the basis of being here, you're on the leading edge. Thank you. You're on the leading edge. This guidance for PCI application security literally came out a week ago, December 7th. And they're recognizing now that monolithic and microservice-based architectures are different, and that your data security programs need to take this into account. So if you are a covered entity for PCI, payment card industry, data security, like so if you process credit cards or accept credit cards or you're a service provider, as of version 4.0, which was published in 2022, your application security program has to take API and business logic attacks into account, as well as your penetration testing has to take this into account. We'll talk about penetration testing more in a few minutes. Most pen testers aren't testing for this. Most pen testers don't know how to test for this, and that leads us to the proliferation of blind spots. So goal number 3, how do you answer these questions that you're going to start getting? What kind of questions should you be preparing yourself for? We will share this deck. I'm not going to read 14 questions to you. But in general, this is a list of questions that we developed to work with CISOs at CISO groups and CISO councils, as well as boards of directors and regulators. What should I be asking? What should I be ready to answer? And these start from easy to hard. If your CISO or your DevSecOps team can answer the number 14, that's a well-run API security program. Most companies can't make it past number 8. Many companies can't make it past number 1. But who owns API security for our company? How many do we have? When you get down to here, this is the type of thing that regulators are going to expect from all of us. But you can't do that if you don't start at the beginning, right? There's no skipping the foundational stuff to get to the advanced stuff. It doesn't work. Ronnie Coleman was 8-time Mr. Olympia, and he had a saying that everybody wants to look like a bodybuilder, but nobody wants to lift any heavy weights, right? There's no skipping the basics to get to the advanced. That's just not reality. So we'll share these slides so that you can see them, but you can see the kind of questions that they're going to be asking. And a lot of these really are in business context. How much money is coming through these APIs? How much private data is going in and out via the APIs? Who's attacking them? How do we know? So forth and so on. And this case study example, this is one that my colleague here ran. This is a logic-based attack against a more than $75 billion bank with parity. Figure it's about a 90 to 100 billion euro bank. And banks measure themselves by asset size. How many assets are under my protection? And what we're able to do is exploit flaws in business logic to conduct a classic salami slicing attack. So 2 movies that you may have seen this in. Office Space. Anybody know the year Office Space came out? 1999, right? So we've known about this for 25 years, and actually Superman 3 was the plot for Superman 3. That came out in 1983, 40 years ago. Banks have known about these types of attacks 40 years ago. We've known about this for a long time, and we're able to do it today, not because the bank's unaware of this type of attack, but the attack surface changed. The attack surface changed and reopened things that they knew about previously. So in this case, we had 4 components of business logic that we abused. The first is minimum amounts for currency conversions. So converting dollars to euros or yen to pesos or whatever you're converting, there's typically a minimum amount. We learned that what Zach figured out was if you go directly to the API, you're able to bypass that. You can bypass the front-end system, the front-end orchestration. Same thing with the enforcement of fees. Banks love fee income, so this is a fee-generating service. When you are able to bypass the fee, you essentially can create small, free currency conversions. And the one at the bottom here, so they had no rate limiting because banks love fee income. So if you want to do it 1,000 times or 10,000 times, great, I get 10,000 fees. Wonderful, sounds wonderful. They did that on purpose. And then most banking systems calculate to either 5 or 6 digits after the decimal. They do that so they can maximize the amount of interest that they charge you. But then they round it up to the nearest penny or the nearest pence. And so by abusing these and going straight to the API and bypassing these front-end systems, you can see here where we were charged a commission for a conversion done via browser. Do it via the API, there's no commission. We kept refreshing. Zach said he hit F5 over and over and over again, waiting for it to be charged, and nope. Conversions are rounded to the nearest hundredth, so if you find the right currency pair, so that's not going to work, that's not going to work, that's not going to work. But if you find, for example, if you sell £1 sterling, you get 1.55 Canadian dollars, or, more useful, if you sell 100th of a pound, you get 0.155 Canadian dollars, which rounds up to 0.02. So you sell 0.01 and you get 0.02. So computers may be dumb, but you know what they are? Fast. So you can do that, and you can do it a couple 100 million times. So as this is scrolling, set the stage. Valid username, valid password, valid token, making valid requests to the API that is responding in the way in which it was designed. 200 responses all day long. What's the hack here? This is why API security is hard. and this is you can see, here we go, we're selling it off a penny at a time. And as we run, you'll see that at the end of this, we run out. Eventually, we sell it all off a penny at a time. But remember, we made conversions free. So what are we going to do? Just going to convert it back and sell it again. And then convert it back and sell it again. So we go from 10,000 to 20,000 and convert it back, 40,000, sell it back, 80,000, sell it back, 160,000. Now, I was the CISO for multiple banks and insurance companies in the US. So we went and talked to this bank and we said, hey, did you see this? And of course they hadn't. This is Zach making it rain here. Yeah, startup funding is hard, but it's not as hard if you know how to do this type stuff. But so the question earlier, like, why would I ransom this bank? Why would we ransomware attack this bank? Why? Why announce yourself? Why negotiate? Why expose yourself to law enforcement if you can take money directly from the APIs? When we went to talk about that bank, we asked, did you see us? Said no. Came back a couple days later and said, okay, here's what we found. When we empty the accounts that we use for currency conversions, we have to go back to the open market and buy more, in this case, British pounds, like anybody else does. And we do a look-back analysis to understand how much fee income did we generate, how much do we need to buy. And at that point, we probably would have noticed we didn't get the fee income we were expecting, and that would have been about the $10 million mark. Now, this bank had an entire team of internal penetration testers that didn't see this because the pen testers didn't know how to attack business logic. They had external pen tests every year, just like every other bank. Change management didn't detect it. They weren't thinking about, their defenses hadn't yet evolved to understand this type of attack surface. But if you know where to look, you do. So back here, if you think of the shift left and shield right, this is your code. If you look in the code and look at the API design, you would have seen there was no rate limiting, which would have dramatically limited the exposure here, as well as the design flaws of relying on front-end systems and client-submitted input for controls like fees and minimum amounts enforcement, right? So you can see this in the design, and fundamentally, because you're exposing your logic to the outside, you need to fix your design. Here, in the testing in the middle, we found this via attack simulated attacks. If you're testing this before prod, you want to find it left of boom, as we say. Over monitoring the production traffic on the right, if you had a baseline for what traffic normally looked like, you would have noticed that our requests looked different than the requests that normally come from the browser or the mobile app. We omitted significant parts of the requests, and then you should have noticed that the same token did it 100 million times. And that's a very atypical behavior. So it's not all doom and gloom, right? We want the presentation to have what, so what, and now what. The now what is you actually can defend against these types of things if you have the tooling in place and the expertise and you know where to look. Most people don't, but it is solvable. If you need a hand with this, I think we're coming up on time, so I want to leave some time for questions. We can help. So you don't have to be an API security expert. You just kind of need to know one. It's like, most institutions have forensics firms on contract. You don't build your internal forensics team because it's just not cost effective and it's very difficult to find the talent. So we can help. Advisory during design, build, as well as penetration testing and honestly, the monitoring and setting that stuff up as well. So whatever you guys need. So let me pause for questions, and I thank you for listening to my 180 word a minute English as I tried to get through the whole deck. What kind of questions do you guys have? Awkward silence doesn't bother me at all. All right, I'll leave with 2 last slides. Oh, okay, good, got one. So I'll just leave this up. You can read it. Key point is there's no AI magic that's going to solve this. It's not real. Go ahead.
My question was simply, how could they not implement rate limiting? I mean, is it kind of common, this kind of security leaks?
Rate limiting?
Yeah.
So an API gateway can do it, or you can do it actually within your code itself. And we've seen companies do it in a variety of ways, even if it's just throttling. That's too much for now, or throw up a CAPTCHA or something like that. So yeah, that's an actually pretty easily solvable problem. And if these guys had done that, if say they kept it at 5,000, they would have lost $50. You're a $90 billion bank, you can lose $50. Okay, but they didn't, and they were unaware. Actually, they were aware. They did it on purpose. They weren't thinking somebody was going to abuse it. They did it on purpose because they love fee income. They told us that. Go ahead.
My question is, how do you do the penetration tests? Is there something automatic, or you do it just manually?
So there's a lot of things that you can automate. So there are a lot of automated tools that we use for things like enumeration, subdomain scanning, word list, discovery. And then once you find the attack, like the script that we ran, that was an automated attack. The human part is the creative part. So chaining the attack together, and this is kind of the way that bots work, right? So bot attacks are automated, but a human had to think of how to do it, right? And so that's the blend. So we automate. We have this kind of WIB serenity prayer: automate everything you can, have experts for the things you can't, and try to be smart enough to know the difference. No. Yeah. 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 I mean, I play around with ChatGPT as much as anybody. But the reality, like, we have a very strict, my VP of product and me, we have a very strict promise to each other: no BS, no buzzwords. I listened to it for 20 years. I can't. Either the people that are saying that don't know that it's not possible, or they do know and they think you don't. And that's insulting. So there's a lot of stuff machine learning can do. There's a lot of stuff, like AI is real. I mean, but creatively chaining together a logic-based attack like that, it's just not true. It's just not real. So, yeah, let's stick with what's real. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I think you mentioned that business logic attacks are becoming more and more common. Why is that? Is it because it's becoming more of a low-hanging fruit because the other attacks are becoming less common?
Yeah, great question. And I don't know that other attacks are actually becoming less common. I think it's because the attackers have figured out that this attack surface is available. And so what we've seen actually attacking APIs in the last maybe 6 months is it used to be that BOLA, broken object level authorization, was the #1 type of attack. That's not true now. Injection is #1. So SQL injection, cross-site scripting, which to me indicates that less sophisticated attackers have figured out that this attack surface is now available. And they know that people aren't looking. So when we think of attacks against APIs and you're not monitoring it, they don't want to be detected. I think that's what's happening. They figured it out. Yeah. By the way, if you have any questions about PCI, that is something that we're specifically building our penetration testing capabilities for, and we've got a booth up here. So happy to talk to you more about that. So thank you for your time, y'all. Appreciate it.